Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 3, Episode 6, where we uncover why emotional intelligence is not just a soft skill, but the master aptitude behind success, focus, and resilience.
Yeah, today we're really digging into some fascinating source material, much of it looking at Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, or EI.
And the core idea that jumps out from these sources is that EI isn't just, nice to have. It's presented as something much deeper, a master aptitude.
Exactly. It's positioned as this underlying factor that really dictates how effectively we use, well, everything else. Our smarts, our talents, the whole package.
Right. So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to pull out the key insights from this material. We want to explore how EI, according to these sources, helps us focus, bounce back from setbacks, resilience, basically, and ultimately achieve what we set out to do.
We'll guide you through it, try to cut through some of the complexity, and get to those really important takeaways about how our emotions shape our thinking and our lives.
Okay, so where should we start? The sources often begin by showing how emotions can, well, get in the way. There's a really vivid story in there, right?
Yeah. The calculus exam anecdote, someone describing just being completely paralyzed by fear during a college exam, heart pounding, feeling of dread. It wasn't just uncomfortable.
It sounds like it just took over completely.
Yeah.
They couldn't even look around, just stared at the test paper, utterly unable to even try the problems. That fear just constricted the mind.
And the sources explain what's happening there. It's not just you feeling bad. Those powerful negative emotions, they actually hijack your attention. They force your focus onto whatever's making you anxious or upset.
Like those intrusive thoughts you might get during really stressful times, say a divorce or dealing with depression. They just seem to fill your head, right?
Exactly. They overwhelm everything else. It's like your mental bandwidth gets completely eaten up by the emotional noise, leaving no room for the actual task at hand.
And this ties directly into something called working memory, doesn't it? That's our ability to hold information in our mind and, work with it. Crucial for pretty much any thinking task.
Absolutely. It's a core executive function based in the prefrontal cortex. Think of it as the brain's CEO, handling planning, complex logic, all that high-level stuff.
And the sources point out this is where feelings and thoughts really meet. So when the limbic system, the emotional hub, goes into overdrive with distress.
It directly messes with the prefrontal cortex's ability to function, which is why when you're really upset or anxious, you literally can't think straight. It's the brain science behind that calculus exam feeling.
Okay, so unchecked emotion can totally sabotage thinking. But the sources flip this around too, right? Positive emotions, motivation, they can boost achievement.
Definitely. They look at top performers, Olympic athletes, world-class musicians, chess grandmasters. What often sets them apart isn't just raw talent, it's this incredible self-motivation, this drive to push through years and years of really tough training.
It's not just discipline, is it? The examples are pretty stark.
They really are. Like the Chinese divers, starting at age 4, logging as many dives by 12 as American divers in their 20s. Or top violin students hitting 10,000 hours of practice by their early 20s, way more than the next tier down.
10,000 hours.
Yeah.
That takes serious dedication. And the sources argue it comes from within, right? Emotional traits.
Yeah, things like genuine enthusiasm, passion for what they're doing, and sheer persistence. That refusal to give up when it gets hard or boring, that's an emotional capacity.
There's also that interesting point about Asian students in American schools.
Right. The research cited found maybe only a tiny IQ advantage on average, like 2 or 3 points.
Yeah.
But their later professional success often suggests a much higher functional IQ.
And the reason given, they just work harder, basically.
Pretty much. One sociologist, Sanford Dornbush, found they spent like 40% more time on homework. There's this deep-seated cultural belief mentioned. Effort equals success. Struggle, study more, stay up later, get up earlier.
It's framed as an emotional edge in the sources.
Exactly. It shows how inner drive, rooted in these emotional attitudes towards effort and persistence, lets people achieve much more, even with similar underlying abilities. It's not just having the engine, it's having the emotional fuel and the driver.
So putting these two sides together, the interference and the enhancement, the sources are saying the degree to which our emotions help or hinder our thinking, planning, goal pursuit, that really sets the limits on what we can do with our innate abilities.
Precisely. When emotions like enthusiasm or that optimal level of anxiety push us, they facilitate achievement. When they interfere, like that test anxiety or overwhelming worry, they hold us back, no matter how smart we might be on paper.
And that's why they call emotional intelligence a master aptitude. It's the thing that governs how well all the other aptitudes actually get used.
Couldn't have put it better. It affects everything else.
Okay, so if it's a master aptitude, how do we see it in action? The marshmallow test comes up a lot in these discussions.
Ah, yes, Walter Mischel's classic study from the 60s. Stanford preschool 4-year-olds. Seems so simple.
The setup is famous.
Yeah.
One marshmallow now, or wait 15, 20 minutes and get two.
Seems trivial, right?
Yeah.
But the sources frame it as this fundamental battle. Impulse versus restraint. A little window into character and potentially life trajectory.
And that ability to resist the impulse, to wait, it's presented as maybe the most basic psychological skill, the absolute root of emotional self-control.
Makes sense. The word emotion itself comes from a root meaning to move. Emotions naturally push us to act, to grab the marshmallow. So learning to pause that impulse is huge.
What was really groundbreaking was tracking those kids over time, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The follow-up studies into adolescence were stunning. The kids who waited, the ones who used strategies like covering their eyes, talking to themselves, playing games to distract themselves, they turned out very differently.
How so?
They were rated as more socially competent, more personally effective, better at handling frustration, less likely to fall apart under stress. They took on challenges, were more self-reliant, trustworthy, confident, just generally better adjusted.
And the ones who grabbed the marshmallow right away.
Sadly, the contrast was pretty stark. They tended to have more problems, described as more stubborn, indecisive, easily upset, more likely to see themselves negatively, mistrustful, prone to jealousy, arguments, and crucially still struggled with delaying gratification years later.
But the most mind-blowing finding, the one everyone talks about.
Yeah, the SAT scores. That 4-year-old's ability to wait for the second marshmallow was twice as powerful a predictor of their adolescent SAT scores as their IQ measured back at age 4.
Twice as powerful. That's staggering.
It is. The average total SAT score difference between the waiters and the grabbers was over 200 points, according to the source material. Huge.
So this simple act of emotional self-regulation at age 4 had this massive predictive power for academic achievement later on, independent of early IQ scores.
Exactly. And the crucial point the sources make is this. While IQ is often seen as relatively fixed, these emotional skills, like impulse control, can be learned. It's a meta-ability. It determines how well you actually deploy the cognitive skills you have.
Okay, so impulse control is foundational. What about managing ongoing moods? Not just impulses, but feelings like anxiety or sadness.
Right, another key piece. The sources talk about foul moods, fouled thinking. There's an anecdote about a mother so consumed by anxiety about her son playing football she couldn't even watch.
That worry becomes like cognitive static, right?
Yeah.
Just noise that drowns out reason and her ability to choose how she wants to live.
Precisely. Worry can be useful sometimes, prompting preparation. But chronic worry just captures your attention and disrupts everything else. And there's solid evidence it undermines intellectual performance.
What kind of evidence?
Well, things like a large study of air traffic controller trainees. Chronic anxiety predicted failure, even among those with superior intelligence scores. Or meta-analyses of over 100 studies showing a clear link. More worry equals poorer academic performance grades, test scores, you name it.
Wow. And they've shown it directly impacts thinking, too.
Yeah, experiments where worriers asked to voice their worries did worse on decision-making tasks. Even non-worriers asked to simulate worrying saw their performance drop. But interestingly, if worriers did relaxation exercises before the task, their performance was fine. It shows worry literally uses up the mental resources you need for the task.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes.
You can be, but the flip side is using anxiety constructively. The sources talk about anticipatory anxiety, that little bit of nervousness before a test or presentation.
Like getting butterflies.
Exactly. People good at managing emotions can harness that feeling to motivate themselves to prepare better, study harder, practice more, which of course leads to doing well.
So it's that upside-down U curve they mentioned.
Right. Too little anxiety, you're apathetic, don't prepare. Too much, you're overwhelmed, performance tanks. The sweet spot is that optimal level of anxiety that sharpens focus and drives preparation. It's about regulation.
And positive moods. Do they help thinking?
Generally, yes. The sources suggest good moods make planning, decision-making feel easier. You tend to think more broadly, see connections, find solutions more readily.
They even mention studies with humor, right? Like watching comedy clips.
Yeah. People who watched funny bloopers were better at solving a classic creative problem-solving puzzle afterward, compared to those who watched a math film or exercised. The positive mood seemed to help them overcome functional fixedness and think more flexibly.
So managing moods, keeping negative ones in check. Leveraging positive ones is another core part of this master aptitude.
Absolutely. Uncontrolled emotion hinders intellect. Learning to guide your emotional state is key.
Okay, moving on from managing internal states. What about things like hope and optimism? How do they fit into EI according to these sources?
They're presented as absolutely crucial, especially for resilience. The sources use a scenario to illustrate. Imagine college students getting a bad grade, say a D, on their first big exam.
How do they react?
It depends heavily on their level of hope. The high hope students, according to the research cited, immediately start thinking, okay, what can I do? I need to work harder, find different study strategies, maybe talk to the professor. They're determined.
And the low hope students.
They tend to just feel defeated. I'm just not cut out for this. There's no point. They get demoralized and basically give up.
And this actually predicts academic success.
Significantly, C.R. Snyder's research has mentioned finding that hope was actually a better predictor of first-year college grades than the students' SAT scores were.
Better than SATs. Again. Wow.
Yeah, it highlights that point again. With similar intellectual ability, these emotional aptitudes can make the real difference.
And hope, as defined here, isn't just passive wishing, right?
Not at all. Snyder defines it as believing you have both the will and the way to achieve your goals. It's about having the motivation and feeling resourceful enough to figure out how to get there, even around obstacles.
So hopeful people are described as self-motivators, resourceful, flexible, able to break down big tasks.
Exactly. And emotionally, it means not getting derailed by anxiety or despair when things go wrong. They tend to experience less depression and anxiety overall.
And optimism is related.
Very closely. Optimism is that general expectation that things will turn out okay, even with setbacks. It's a buffer against apathy and hopelessness, though the sources are careful to point towards realistic optimism.
Let's try an example.
Matt Biondi, the Olympic swimmer, rebounded from early losses to win multiple golds. A test by psychologist Martin Seligman showed his optimistic style. When told a deliberately false, slow time after a swim, he actually swam faster on the next try. His pessimistic teammates tended to swim slower after similar feedback.
Interesting. So how does Seligman explain that difference?
It's all about how you explain setbacks to yourself, your explanatory style. Optimists tend to see failure as due to specific, changeable external factors. I used the wrong strategy, or that situation was tough. This lets them adapt and try again.
Whereas pessimists?
Pessimists tend to blame failure on permanent personal flaws. I'm just stupid, or I always mess things up. This leads to feeling helpless and giving up.
And this style impacts achievement too.
Massively. Seligman's research at UPenn found optimism scores predicted freshman grades better than SATs or high school performance. He argues achievement depends not just on talent, but crucially on the ability to handle defeat. Tests miss that motivational piece.
The insurance salesman study is also cited, right?
Oh yeah, the MetLife study, very telling. Sales means constant rejection, small defeats. The optimistic new salespeople outsold the pessimistic ones by a huge margin, like 37% more over 2 years, and were only half as likely to quit.
Because they interpreted rejection differently.
Exactly. For the optimist, a no meant, maybe I need a different approach, or that person wasn't the right fit. For the pessimist, it meant, I'm a failure at this. One leads to trying again, the other to giving up. Optimism fuels hope.
And again, the sources stress this can be learned.
Yes. While temperament plays a role, optimism and hope, just like learned helplessness, aren't entirely fixed. This links to Albert Bandura's idea of self-efficacy.
Which is?
Your belief in your own ability to succeed, to meet challenges. When you build competence in something, it boosts your self-efficacy. That makes you more willing to take risks, persist through difficulties. Success breeds more self-efficacy.
So people with high self-efficacy bounce back better.
Exactly. Bandura says they focus on how to tackle the problem, not on their own potential shortcomings. This positive, hopeful, optimistic mindset allows them to use their skills more effectively and even develop new ones.
Okay, so we have impulse control, mood management, hope, optimism. What about peak performance? Where does that fit in?
That brings us to flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's concept. It's that state of being totally absorbed in an activity, performing at your best, often feeling effortless and joyful. Athletes call it the zone.
Like the composer example, feeling the music just flows out, or the skier feeling like a waterfall.
Precisely. The sources describe flow as emotional intelligence at its peak. Emotions aren't just managed, they're positive, energized, and perfectly aligned with the task. You're fully harnessing them for performance or learning.
What are the key features of flow?
Intense focus. where your awareness merges with your actions. You lose track of time, self-consciousness disappears. It's the opposite of worry. There's a sense of control, but you're not really thinking about controlling things. The activity itself is the reward.
How do you get into that state?
It typically requires deep concentration on a task you're skilled at, but one that pushes your abilities just a little bit. Csikszentmihalyi calls it the delicate zone between boredom and anxiety. Not too easy, not too hard.
And the brain science is interesting here, too.
Yeah, it's kind of paradoxical. Even though you're tackling challenges, brain scans during flow show less cortical arousal, less effortful activity in some ways. It's like the relevant neural circuits become super efficient because the skills are so well practiced.
Yeah.
It's neural efficiency, unlike the brain strain of worry.
And this connects to learning.
Absolutely. Flow is a huge motivator for mastery. You want to get better at something, partly so you can continue experiencing flow in it. The enjoyment drives the practice, like the study of artists. Those driven by the joy of painting itself, by flow, stuck with it. Those chasing fame or fortune often drifted away.
Does this apply to students, too?
Definitely. Studies show students who regularly get into flow while studying tend to do better academically, regardless of baseline potential. One study on high school math students found the high achievers experienced flow while studying far more often than low achievers who found it boring or anxiety-provoking.
So finding flow in learning makes you want to learn more.
Exactly. It makes learning intrinsically rewarding. This ties into Howard Gardner's ideas, too. He suggests finding activities where kids experience flow is the best way to teach, tapping into their natural motivation and strengths. Learning happens best when you care and enjoy it.
Tailoring the challenge to hit that sweet spot between boredom and anxiety.
Right. It's a more humane, effective model. Success in one area where you find flow can then build confidence to tackle challenges elsewhere. Mastery happens almost naturally when you're drawn to something you love.
Okay, so bringing it all together from the sources. This idea of channeling emotions productively, whether it's impulse control, managing moods, building hope, or finding flow, that really is the essence of this master aptitude.
It underpins everything. It's how you guide your efforts effectively, make the most of your cognitive abilities. Success isn't just raw horsepower. It's how well you manage the driver and the fuel.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener. We've journeyed through these sources looking at how emotional intelligence is framed not just as a social skill, but as this fundamental master aptitude influencing focus, resilience, achievement.
We've touched on key mechanisms discussed in the material. That basic ability to delay gratification from the marshmallow test, managing anxiety versus leveraging positive moods, using hope and optimism to push through setbacks, and achieving peak performance through flow.
And understanding this perspective from the sources, well, it really could change how you think about tackling challenges, approaching learning, or pursuing goals in your own life.
Because if we take these insights seriously, if emotional intelligence is this learnable master aptitude, and if, as the sources suggest, it can predict vital life outcomes, sometimes even better than traditional measures like IQ.
Then it really makes you think, doesn't it? What does this imply about the skills you should focus on developing? Not just in yourself, perhaps, but also nurturing in others, your colleagues, your kids, the people around you. Something to consider.